There are moments when you don't need to raise your voice to reclaim your power. You only need to say one sentence, calm, concise, without shouting, without trembling, yet powerful enough to make the narcissist step back. Not because you threaten them, but because they can no longer see their reflection in your eyes. All of their power comes from your reaction. When you cry, they feel in control. When you get angry, they feel alive. When you try to explain, they feel victorious. But eventually, there comes a moment when you stop reacting. You look at them with calm awareness, and in that instant, the entire false world they've built begins to crumble. Carl Jung once said, "Those who cannot face their own darkness will project it onto others." The narcissist lives exactly like that. They unload the ugliness they can't bear within themselves onto you and call it the truth. They want you to believe that you are the problem, so they never have to face themselves. But once you see through the game, you're no longer their puppet. The light of awareness is the only thing they cannot endure. This isn't a lesson in retaliation, it's a ritual of closure. It's not about defeating someone, but about withdrawing your energy from their game. One sentence spoken from understanding can dissolve every illusion. I'm not teaching you how to argue. I'm teaching you how to speak less, but speak as someone who has walked through fear. I will give you 10 sentences, 10 verbal boundaries, calm, fearless, with no need to prove anything powerful enough to make any narcissist step back. Not because you are stronger, but because you no longer exist within their world. When you understand, you don't need to argue. When you are authentic, you don't need to explain. And when you are at peace, every manipulation dissolves. Sometimes, a single sentence said at the right time, in the right state of being, can end an entire cycle of pain. Because true power does not lie in silencing them, but in no longer being moved by them. Sentence 1. I am no longer controlled by your emotions. It's a short sentence, but if you truly understand its weight, you'll realize this is not just a boundary, it's a revolution of consciousness. Because a narcissist never truly holds power through strength or logic. They hold power through emotional leverage. They don't need to chain your hands, they only need to make you react, and they've already chained your soul. When you get angry, they feel valuable. When you suffer, they feel powerful. When you try to understand them, they feel in control. In that game, every one of your emotions becomes an invisible string that binds you to them. But one day, you wake up and say, I am no longer controlled by your emotions. It's not a declaration of war, it's an energetic detachment. This sentence doesn't aim outward, it turns inward. It's not directed at them, but at yourself, the one who once allowed their heart to be dragged through storms that were never theirs to bear. You're declaring that you've reclaimed sovereignty over your mind and emotions. In that moment, you're no longer the puppet of manipulation, you're the one holding the strings. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The narcissist is the physical embodiment of that unconscious shadow, the part of you that reacts, that gets pulled into nameless emotional waves. When you stop being governed by their emotions, you're not just breaking free from them, you're liberating yourself from your own unconscious patterns. You're moving from living in reaction to living in awareness. In toxic relationships, most people don't realize they're under emotional hypnosis. Every time they act hurt, you soften. Every time they get angry, you fear. Every time they go silent, you panic. And so, you start modifying your behavior to soothe them, unaware that you've been programmed to regulate their emotions at the cost of your own. This is the trauma bond, an attachment rooted in fear and guilt. You get trapped in the loop. They hurt you, then comfort you, and you confuse pain with love. The sentence, I am no longer controlled by your emotions, is a ritual of breaking the spell. When you say it calmly, not in anger, not in defiance, you're declaring, I see what you're doing. I see how you try to stir me, and I choose not to react. At the energetic level, it's like unplugging the cord from the socket. Every rage, tear, or guilt they try to evoke to feed off your energy suddenly becomes useless. You've stopped fueling their system. In Jungian psychology, this is the moment of individuation, the process of separating your true self from external influences. You begin to discern what emotions are truly yours and what were implanted by someone else's manipulation. You realize that much of your sorrow didn't originate from your own experiences, but from someone else's attempts to make you feel guilty, worthless, or never enough. When you see this clearly, you return everything to its rightful owner. You stop carrying emotions that aren't yours. Interestingly, when you say this, the narcissist won't understand. They might scoff or mock you. Oh, you're acting all enlightened now, because they cannot tolerate a reality where you are calm and unaffected. In their mind, your serenity is an insult. They'll try to provoke you again through pity, threats, or nostalgic memories. But make no mistake, this isn't reconciliation, it's panic from someone who just lost control. Sentence 2. That's not my responsibility. There is no sentence more disarming to a narcissist than this one. It's simple, concise, non-confrontational, yet it severs the false sense of duty and guilt they've been feeding on all along. Narcissists survive by reversing responsibility. They hurt you, but you end up apologizing. They break promises, but blame you for expecting too much. They destroy things, then look at you sadly and say, "See, you made me do this." Bit by bit, they make you believe that their emotions, their actions, even their happiness are somehow your job. That's the height of psychological manipulation, turning someone else into the caretaker of their soul. When you say, "That's not my responsibility," you're resetting the energetic boundary, returning to them what was never yours to carry. It may sound small, but at the unconscious level, it's a revolution of will. Because narcissists don't fear criticism, they fear accountability. Every one of their tactics, blame, fake victimhood, emotional aggression, is designed to avoid self-responsibility. Carl Jung wrote, "Everything that we deny in ourselves appears in the world as fate." The narcissist made you their fate, the person who carries what they refuse to face. When you take the blame, they feel relieved. When you heal them, they feel righteous. When you explain yourself, they feel justified. While you exhaust yourself carrying the weight of two people, they continue to live in the illusion of innocence. But one day you stop. You don't scream, "I've done enough." You simply say quietly, "That's not my responsibility." No anger, no defense, no tears, just clarity. And in that moment, your soul steps out of their game. They'll be confused, maybe sarcastic, maybe angry, maybe suddenly fragile and pleading, because in their dictionary, love equals service. And you've just declared that you no longer serve. At a deeper spiritual level, this sentence touches the core of detachment. Empaths often carry other people's pain, mistaking it for compassion. Jung called this unconscious empathy, when you're not yet aware enough to distinguish between compassion and enmeshment. Narcissists exploit this confusion. They make you feel like you're a bad person if you don't rescue them. They build a silent contract where their happiness depends on you, and suddenly your kindness becomes captivity. Sentence 3. I will not allow anyone to speak to me that way. This sentence may sound simple, but it's the ultimate boundary of dignity. It's not just demanding respect from others, it's a declaration to the universe that you will no longer tolerate disrespect disguised as love. This is the voice of someone who has seen the entire destructive loop: flattery, humiliation, apology, humiliation again, and chooses to end it, not through war, but through a calm, steady sentence. When you say, "I will not allow anyone to speak to me that way," you're not reacting, you're defining the laws of your energetic space. For a narcissist, this is unacceptable, because their entire existence depends on defining how others should feel. They need you to believe that their words have the authority to define your worth, that you deserve criticism, control, or punishment. So when you calmly say, "I will not allow it," you strip them of their favorite privilege, the right to violate. In Jungian depth psychology, this is the act of protecting your psychic boundary. Every human being is an energy field, biological, emotional, spiritual. Every word, every glance, every gesture is like a needle that can pierce that boundary. If you've lived too long in an environment of subtle abuse, You become numb to these needles. But your energy body remembers. It stores every silent tolerance, every self-justification for someone who hurt you. Eventually, it cracks through anxiety, fatigue, depression, a loss of self-worth. This sentence is the act of stitching that boundary back together. It's not just for others, it's a vow to yourself. I will no longer be complicit in my own disrespect through silence. Each time you say it, even softly, you're sewing together the thread between self-respect and soul. It's like rebuilding a fallen wall, not to isolate, but to protect what's sacred within. The narcissist will likely mock you. Relax, can't you take a joke? Or you're too sensitive. Because they know you've just struck their control point language. Words are their weapon of choice. They use words to bend your mind, to make you doubt your own perception. So when you take away that weapon, you're not just stopping an argument, you're burning the last bridge they had into your psyche. On a higher level, this is moral awakening. You realize that love and humiliation can never coexist. You understand that mockery is not affection, and honest criticism without empathy is not love. You don't need to argue because you no longer wish to live on that frequency. You're choosing a different reality, one built on respect, not control. And when you say this, remember, don't say it with anger. Anger is reaction, and reaction is fuel. Say it with the calm of someone who is awakened. Low voice, clear tone, no explanation, no challenge. Don't try to convince them they're wrong. Just declare that you no longer participate. If they persist, walk away. Not to win, but to preserve the peace that is now your baseline. Sentence 4. I don't argue about reality. This is a silent finishing blow to every form of verbal manipulation, gaslighting, and blame reversal. It needs no raised voice and no proof. Yet it makes the narcissist collapse inside the game they're best at, bending the truth. Narcissists live in a world where reality can be edited to serve the ego. If they hurt you, they say you're too sensitive. If they lie, they call it a misunderstanding. If you catch them, they counterattack. You're imagining things. For them, truth isn't something to be honored. It's raw material to be molded to protect their image. That's why they don't fear arguments, they crave them. Every time you explain so, they'll understand you've stepped into the maze they built, where every exit leads to the same place. You are the one at fault. I don't argue about reality is how you pull your foot out of that maze. It's your declaration that you no longer participate in their illusion. You don't need their agreement, their confession, or their understanding. You only need to stand with the reality you know is true. In that moment, their entire manipulation system, which feeds on your confusion and reactivity, collapses in silence. This isn't arrogance. It's awakened awareness. Narcissists don't win by logic, but by dragging you down to their level, a plane of chaos, where the lines between right and wrong, true and false, love and control are blurred. When you say, I don't argue about reality, you hold the higher ground not by force, but by clarity. You're saying, you're free to deny your reality, but I won't deny mine. Carl Jung once said, reasoning with an unenlightened mind is futile. It does not seek truth, it seeks self-protection. That is precisely the narcissist psychology's self-defense through distortion. They can't tolerate objective reality because reality mirrors what they reject, their weakness, cowardice, smallness. When you point to what's real, they feel attacked. When they distort, they feel back in control of their fear. Each time you react, you're feeding that fear. Sentence 5. I understand you're angry, but that doesn't give you permission to hurt me. This sentence may sound gentle, but it carries the strength of a life lived, learning to distinguish emotion from behavior. It draws the fine line between compassion and self-respect. Narcissists constantly lean on their anger to justify harming others. They scream, belittle, stonewall, smash, manipulate, and when the dust settles, they say, I just lost control. The truth is, they didn't lose control. They chose that reaction because in that moment, it made them feel powerful. This sentence is the mirror of wakefulness you hold up so they can see their real face. It doesn't deny their feelings. Anger is human, but it separates emotion from action, and that separation is exactly what destabilizes them. They can only thrive in a world where those two are fused. They hurt you and call it love. They humiliate you and call it being honest. They sabotage you and say, I was just hurting. When you separate the two, their emotional spell breaks. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This sentence is how you force them to confront their darkness. They must face the reality that anger is no longer a license for cruelty. When you speak it, you're not provoking, you're reflecting. I see your feeling, but I will not allow you to turn that feeling into a weapon. What terrifies a narcissist most is not criticism, but conscious calm, because it leaves them exposed. In their rage, they expect your fear, your tears, your defenses. That's how they charge up. But when you say this slowly, firmly, warmly, they stumble, because you've denied them their ritual of power. You neither attack nor flee. You stand present, clear, and grounded. For them, that is unbearable. Psychologically, this is emotional individuation, learning to witness another's emotion without being swallowed by it. You recognize their anger doesn't belong to you, doesn't define you, and isn't yours to heal. It's their energy, their responsibility. Your understanding does not equal your endurance. This is the meeting point of kindness and wisdom, compassion, without self-erasure. A narcissist will respond in two predictable ways. Mockery. Oh, picking up therapy phrases now, or offense. So you're calling me an abuser. Both are old tactics, distractions to pull you off center. Don't bite. They cannot bear limits. Boundaries make them feel small. All the more reason to hold yours. This boundary isn't to punish them. It's to protect your wholeness. This sentence also heals the empath. Empaths often believe that if they understand someone's pain, they must forgive, accept, and stay. But understanding is not the same as tolerating. You can see the cause, feel the wound, and still choose to protect yourself. That doesn't make you cold. It makes you fair to your own soul. Sentence 6. My silence is not consent. This is among the most powerful lines a formerly manipulated person can learn, because it strikes at the root of the power narcissists rely on: coerced silence. For years, they've read your silence as agreement. Each time you stayed quiet while they raged, they assumed you were weak. Each time you kept the peace, they assumed you were afraid. Each time you didn't respond to an insult, they assumed you agreed, you deserved it. They mistook your calm for capitulation. And inside that quiet, they built their kingdom of illusion and counterfeit power. But when you say, my silence is not consent, you reverse the structure of the game. Your silence is no longer the product of fear, but an act of agency. You're not quiet to avoid the storm, you're quiet to step out of it. This sentence isn't just a warning to them, it's your declaration to yourself. I have the right to choose silence without being defined by it. Jung once wrote, in every relationship, power belongs to the one who can be silent without losing themselves. A narcissist, by contrast, cannot endure silence. For them, silence is the void where they're no longer reflected, no longer existent. They need arguments, tears, explanations, anything that proves they still control your emotions. So when you're silent yet fully present, they panic. My silence is not consent, tells them. Your quiet isn't a vacuum, it's a boundary. Recall all the times you endured. You stayed quiet when they fabricated stories because you didn't want to make a scene. You stayed quiet when they raged because you hoped they'd calm down. You stayed quiet when they belittled you because you thought they didn't mean it. After each silence, you lost another piece of self-respect. That quiet became fertile soil for manipulation to take root. You woke up in a warped world where liars were believed and the honest were doubted. This sentence is the retrieval of your silence. It says, I may be quiet, but I am not muzzled. You no longer use silence as a wall of fear, but as a line of awareness. You choose not to argue, not because you're weak, but because you know every argument is a win for them. They want your reaction. Reaction is energy. When you're silent and inwardly bright, you cut off their fuel, the very substance they require to exist. On a deeper level, this is a statement of spiritual sovereignty. Empaths are often coerced into energetic consent. Others assume that because you didn't push back, you agreed. In the energetic world, that's how manipulators slip in. They read silence as invitation. This sentence is the door closing. It declares, silence is not an open door. Silence is preservation. You owe no one a reaction. Truth does not need your shouting to remain true. Sentence 7. You have the right to think whatever you want, and I have the right not to participate. This sentence is the summit of inner freedom, and also the one thing a narcissist fears most, because it severs the invisible cord they've always used to pull you into their mental labyrinth. The need for validation. Narcissists survive on reflection. They don't care about truth. They only care about who believes their version of it. When they can no longer control your actions, they try to control your perception of them. They want you to understand them, pity them, even hate them, as long as you're still thinking about them. Because in their world, to be thought of is to exist. But the sentence, you have the right to think whatever you want, and I have the right not to participate, breaks that entire mechanism. It says, I no longer live inside your mind. At first glance, it sounds light, even polite, yet at its core, it's a declaration of cognitive sovereignty. It neither denies nor attacks them. It simply withdraws your energy from their narrative. You're saying, I don't need you to understand me, agree with me, or believe me. I just need to be at peace in my own awareness. And to a narcissist, that's true collapse, because they cannot tolerate someone existing outside their definition. Carl Jung once said, nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent. Likewise, nothing makes a person lose control faster than seeing someone escape their influence. The narcissist is a living example. They need people to orbit around them like planets around the sun, not because they shine, but because without those orbits, they must face the void within. When you say, I have the right not to participate, you step out of that orbit. You're no longer pulled by their gravity, and for them, that's a spiritual collapse. Imagine being in a chess game where the other player keeps forcing your next move, provoking, lying, messaging, slandering, all to make you react. Every time you respond, they feel they still control the game. But when you smile and say, you have the right to think that, and I have the right not to participate, you flip the board over. The game ends not because someone won, but because you stopped playing. The beauty of this sentence lies in its detachment, not arrogance. You no longer need to prove you're right, because you understand. Truth doesn't need validation to remain true. You only need coherence within yourself. And that's the one thing the narcissist can never reach. They live through opposition and have no idea what it feels like to be at peace with themselves. Watch their reaction when you say this. They'll sneer or get angry. Wow, you always think you're better than everyone. Oh, so now you think you're enlightened? That's the defensive reflex of someone losing their center of control. Because your sentence forces them to face what they fear most, the meaninglessness of the arguments they create. Sentence 8. I don't need to prove anything. This may sound simple, but it carries the weight of a soul that has stepped out of the oldest game narcissists have ever played, the game of proving your worth. If you've ever loved a narcissist, you know this feeling. You're constantly explaining, defending, proving that you're good enough, loyal enough, loving enough, understanding enough. And every time you succeed, the standard shifts again. The harder you try, the more exhausted you become, because you're playing a game where the prize doesn't exist. A narcissist doesn't seek truth. They seek the energy of justification. Every word you say to explain yourself, they don't listen with empathy. They calculate, they're still reacting. That means I still have control. When you argue, you feed them. When you cry, you confirm their power. When you explain, you hand them the right to decide whether you're right or wrong. But when you say, I don't need to prove anything, everything shifts. In one brief sentence, you reclaim all the energy you once gave away. You stop striving to be understood, believed, or accepted because you realize that truth needs no audience. This is the moment you escape the emotional matrix, the realm where your worth depends on your ability to convince others. Carl Jung wrote, "One does not become free by avoiding something, but by becoming conscious of it." When you say this, you're not running away. You're looking directly at the truth that you once lived for validation. You once believed that if you were good enough, they would change. If you were clear enough, they would understand. If you loved enough, they would love you back. But now you know that was the dream of the abandoned child, trying to prove they're worthy of love. "I don't need to prove anything" isn't arrogance, it's recovery. You're not denying responsibility. You're refusing to be manipulated by it. You're still humble, but you're no longer self-erasing. You still recognize your mistakes, but you won't let anyone weaponize them against you. This is the boundary between humility and self-destruction. The narcissist will react as if you've stabbed their ego. They'll say, "Oh, so you think you're perfect now? I'm just trying to understand, why won't you talk? You're so selfish. You always have to be right." But what truly disturbs them isn't your words. It's the energy of freedom in your voice. Because the person they once programmed to chase approval now stands calm, unreactive, no longer fighting to be believed, no longer seeking justice from someone incapable of giving it. In depth psychology, this marks the birth of the authentic self. In the stages of healing after narcissistic abuse, this is the fifth step after panic, anger, grief, and silence. This is when you begin to think, feel, and speak as a free person. You no longer need them to confirm your existence. You don't need to win arguments because you've left the battlefield. You also stop trying to prove them wrong. Because proving is still dependence. It still makes them the judge. When you say, "I don't need to prove anything," you're freeing yourself from the courtroom. They built a trial with no lawyers, no justice, and no end. The deepest power of this sentence is that it returns ownership to truth itself. Truth doesn't need believers to remain true. It only needs to be known, lived, and held by you. Once you understand that, you become an autonomous source of energy, the self, which Jung described as the central light within the chaotic darkness of the ego. And then something miraculous happens. When you stop proving, you start living. Instead of pouring your energy into being understood, you redirect it into creating, healing, learning. Your silence no longer carries the bitterness of suppression, but the fragrance of freedom. Sentence 9. I'm not afraid of you anymore. There is no sentence that terrifies a narcissist more than this one. Not because you threaten them, but because fear is the last string they have left to control you. Throughout the relationship, they've carefully planted seeds of fear in you, fear of abandonment, fear of losing love, fear of being misunderstood, fear of their rage, fear of isolation, fear that no one will believe you. Each fear became a chain, and they learned how to pull those chains to make you bow. But one day, you look straight into their eyes, not with anger, but with the quiet gaze of someone who has awakened, and you say, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." And in that moment, every ounce of power they ever had turns to dust. Carl Jung once said, "What you most need to know is what you most fear to face." In the journey with a narcissist, what you fear is never really them. It's the shadow of yourself they represent. They touch the deepest wounds within you, the memory of rejection, the belief that you're not enough, the terror of losing love, the pain of being unseen. They make you believe that without them, you'll collapse. But when you survive the storm, when you touch your fear and realize it no longer carries the same weight, you don't just free yourself from them, you liberate your soul. Fear is the fuel of manipulation. Every narcissist knows this instinctively. They don't need physical violence to make you submit. All they need to whisper is, "No one will ever love you like I do," or "If you leave, everyone will turn against you." And you believed it. They built your world into a maze where every exit led back to them. But each day you survive after leaving. Each morning you wake up and realize you're still breathing, still standing, still alive. You're breaking down another wall of that maze until no walls remain. When you say, "I'm not afraid of you anymore," you're speaking the language of a soul that has walked through darkness and returned. You don't say it to sound strong. You say it because you are strong now. You've sat in the silence. You've listened to the whispers of your old wounds. You've cried, trembled, and then risen. You understand now that what frightened you was never the person. It was the illusion of power you gave them. When that illusion fades, all that's left is a small, frightened, hollow human hiding behind a mask. This sentence doesn't need to be shouted. It doesn't need to sound tough. The quieter you say it, the stronger it becomes. Because real power doesn't come from volume, it comes from presence. The narcissist will try to reignite that fear through threats, pity, stories, or fake weakness. They'll say things like, "You don't know what I'm capable of. If you leave, I'll destroy everything. You think you're fine now? You'll come back." But this time, their words are only echoes in the distance, because you no longer vibrate at the frequency of fear. You stand on the other side of the darkness where peace is no longer a dream but the truth. Sentence 10, "I forgive you, but I'm not coming back." This is the final point of the entire journey, both a farewell and a rebirth ritual. It's a sentence that only those who have walked through hell can say with calmness, because they've learned that forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's freeing themselves from the rope that once bound their soul. The narcissist always believes forgiveness means another chance. In their mind, forgiveness is a back door into the game, a place where they can return, retry, reclaim. But for you, "I forgive you, but I'm not coming back," is the declaration of soul sovereignty. It means, "I have seen you. I understand the cause. I hold no hatred, but I also refuse to keep repeating the cycle." Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become whole by hiding one's wounds, but by making them conscious." Forgiveness, at its deepest level, is this transformation. You don't deny the wound. You simply refuse to let it dictate your future. You look at the person who once hurt you not with resentment, but with clarity. "You taught me about boundaries, about self-respect, and about what real love is, something you were never capable of giving." When you say, "I forgive you, but I'm not coming back," you're closing the emotional contract between two souls. Forgiveness here isn't about moral superiority. It's about cutting the energetic cord that was draining you. True forgiveness is an act of freedom, not weakness. It's when you stop demanding justice from someone who has no capacity to give it. You don't need their apology. You don't need their understanding. You simply release them back to themselves and return yourself to peace. The narcissist won't understand this. They'll mistake your calm for hesitation, your compassion for confusion. They'll try again. "I've changed. Didn't you once say forgiveness is love? If you've really let go, why can't we start over?" But this time, they'll meet something different in your eyes. Silence that no longer belongs to them. Because your forgiveness isn't meant to restore the relationship, it's meant to transcend it. In Jungian healing, this is the stage of integration where every fragment of pain becomes living wisdom. You no longer need to divide the world into victims and villains because you've seen the larger truth. All are actors in a spiritual drama, each teaching the other what they most need to learn. The narcissist taught you the value of self-worth. You, in turn, taught them, though they may never grasp it, that love is not the same as control. "I forgive you, but I'm not coming back," marks the moment you've alchemized pain into wisdom. You no longer seek revenge, because you know all falsehood collapses on its own. You no longer need them to see you, because you already see yourself. You no longer crave love, because you have become it love that exists without dependency. At a deeper level, this sentence is a farewell to the past. You're saying to your old life, "Thank you, my lesson is complete." You don't erase the memories. You don't force forgetting, but you no longer let those memories define the present. Forgiveness is the final act of a soul reclaiming itself after being possessed by pain. And not coming back is the vow to protect that soul from ever being taken again. When this journey comes to an end, you will realize true power does not come from defeating the narcissist, but from no longer needing to. You don't win through revenge. sharp words, or proving you were right. You win through enlightened silence, through the calm gaze that sees a soul still trapped in its own loop, and through walking away without looking back. All 10 sentences were never meant to be weapons of attack. They are rituals of awakening. Each one, when spoken at the right moment and from the right state of being, becomes a doorway to freedom, not only freedom from them, but from the entire architecture of fear, guilt, and dependency that once imprisoned you. Every time you speak truth in a peaceful voice, you're teaching the world how to respect you without shouting. You're rewriting your story, not as the character being controlled, but as the author holding the pen. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that's exactly what you have done. You did not deny the darkness. You faced it eyes open, heart trembling but steady. You saw the part of yourself that once begged, once bent, once broke, and instead of despising it, you embraced it. That embrace is what made you whole. No more need to prove. No more fear. No more dependence. Only clarity, stillness, and inner power remain. And when you move through life carrying that energy, the universe begins to rearrange itself around you. Relationships, opportunities, people all will mirror your new vibration. Honesty, respect, and consciousness. Don't see this as merely the ending of a relationship. It's the ending of an unconscious cycle that has repeated for lifetimes, the cycle of seeking worth outside yourself, of living in reaction instead of sovereignty. When you speak these sentences, when you stand firm in your peace, you are not just healing yourself, you are healing a collective pattern of those once ruled by fear, guilt, and misplaced love. And then, in the stillness, you will hear a strange and beautiful sound, not an apology, not footsteps returning, but the voice of your own soul, clear, deep, and true. I'm back. I am myself. I no longer live in anyone else's game. From that moment on, you won't need to say another word, because your presence, quiet, lucid, and sovereign, is the answer.